What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Turn the Jets podcast. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPod11 on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Middle of the week here, Tuesday, so basically middle of the week here. I was out of camp yesterday, had another training camp practice today. The Jets are in full pads. Want to come on talk a little bit of Jets football with ESPN, Q1043, Jets pre and post, ESPN Radio, the whole 9 yards. Dan Graca. Dan, how are we doing today, man?
Will, I'm doing good, man. Football's upon us. It's good to have another season, and thanks for having me on. It should be fun.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah, no, look, I hope for your sake there will be a lot more exciting, post games that don't involve angry callers about Zach Wilson and Alan Lazard and Robert Saleh and so on and so forth. Want to start with kind of, before we get into just kind of what camps look like so far, off season, kind of going as you expected. Where were your expectations higher going into camp this year than last year? Because I feel like that's been a big discussion of the roster's probably better this year, but the expectations last year felt like there was a little bit more excitement just in terms of fans letting it go as opposed to this year.
Yeah, I remember last year, I think the novelty was, of course, Rodgers, right? Because the Jets had never had anything like him at the quarterback position, maybe outside of the 1 year of Brett Favre, in 2008. But no, I think when you compare last year's team versus this year's team on paper, I think clearly this squad is a lot deeper and a lot more talented, to be quite honest with you. And look, I don't think that any team is going to be able to survive, God forbid, a significant injury at the quarterback position like the Jets experienced last year. But when you look at this roster, both offensively, defensively, the pieces that Joe Douglas went all in and got this past offseason, I mean, Will, think about it. Like, they are essentially going all in to try to win this year. And I think that's the smart approach to take because you don't know how long you have with Aaron Rodgers playing at what you hope is a high level. Like, I know he said over the weekend, I'd like to have 2 more great years. Okay, that's great. But if you're the Jets, make sure that at least this year is going to be a great one. And then everything else after that is gravy. So, look, health is a big part of it. Any team can say that, but you got to like this team on paper heading into the year.
Yeah, look, I don't think there's many holes. I think, you look at depth, maybe interior defensive line depth, maybe safety, linebacker, things like that in case of an injury. Obviously, quarterback, it is quarterback. Maybe interior offensive line, again, could you add a piece here? Could you add a piece there in receiver? But generally speaking, this is one of the best rosters in the AFC. Jets have obviously been now through about a week of practice here. I believe, 6, 7 practices here, 2 days in full pads. I was out there yesterday. Some takeaways. The one thing, a couple of big talking points coming out of those, the offense was great the first 4 days. They've kind of sucked the last few days. I'm going to just say I would not overreact. Usually during camp, the defense usually starts quick, especially when it comes to full pads. And there's a lot of installs, a lot of, different mental hurdles for some of these young guys. This is an offense, again, that has not worked a ton together. So do you make anything of the offense having a couple of bad days here, or is that a lot of we're kind of bored and trying to overreact to different things?
Well, that's what it is, slow news day, right? And I think you got to make a story out of something. And right, I was out there yesterday too, just like you, and I saw the same things. And it's funny because where they had us watching practice up on the balcony there, you were a little bit away from the field, but you could hear the quarterback as clear as day, expressing his frustration, his displeasure with the execution for some of these guys. And it was funny because on our radio show this morning, I had hearkened back to a situation from Hard Knocks last summer, if you remember. Like, there was an episode where Randall Cobb got all the wide receivers together, and he basically told them, he's like, look, you better get your details together. You better make sure you have everything squared away because this quarterback, he's not going to wait for you. He's not going to throw you the ball if he doesn't trust you. And I think you saw another example of that yesterday when he kind of laid into the offense and, bad snaps from the offensive line, a couple of, stepped on his foot or whatever and caused him to trip on a handoff there. These are the type of things, and I guess when the calendar still says July, it's good to be going through these things as opposed to, September, October, once this thing starts going for real. But yeah, I mean, would I react too much? No. I mean, I talked to a couple of dudes after the practice yesterday. I said, what was going on? Why was it so sloppy? They're like, I don't know, first day of pads, everybody kind of gets weird. And he said guys weren't really talking to each other all that much out on the field. Read into that what you want. But look, I think it's already the dog days of July, even if it's still technically the first week of camp.
Yeah, no, I had similar kind of experiences. A lot of the conversations were, hey, I'm not really sure why we're so sloppy, man. That sucked. We weren't good today. And things like that. I think you see that throughout camp. Again, this Jets defense is also really good. So they're going to make any offense look not great during practice. I think that's one thing. The Tippmann thing I want to hit on quickly because it is a bit of a talking point. I kind of want to preface it with this, and I'm curious your thoughts on it. Look, that mean Joe Tippmann's not a good football player because he's had trouble snapping the last 3 or 4 days? No. Does it mean he's a bust or he's not going to be a good starter or he can't fix it? No, of course none of these things are true. That said, I do think it's fair to be like, snap the fucking ball, man. And that's exactly what Aaron Rodgers was saying. And it's not about that's an easy thing to correct. I think part of it's probably Tittman's a massive center, and you're just not quite as low in your stance as somebody else that's shorter, and Rodgers getting used to it in the whole 9 yards. I just think they're valuable reps that they lose, and you saw part of the reason the offense was kind of off kilter yesterday was the defense is now rushing in full pads, and these offensive now have to block. And Javon Kinlaw at 340 pounds, and it's 35 pounds of muscle he's gained, and all those different things. Defensive tackle shaded over your head, and you're botching snaps. Then you're stepping on his toes, and Rodgers losing it. Again, it's not a big deal. It's just it does need to get fixed because it is reps they're going to lose, especially when this first team offense is not going to play much in the preseason. Is there anything more to it to that? And I just feel like people are getting so out of whack with it. He got to stop the ball, man. Like that's it.
Yeah, I mean, you would think it's as simple as that, but, from everything that we know, I mean, there's no injuries or anything with Joe Tittman. And look, the thing to remember is, yes, he's still a very young player. They have a lot of high hopes for him. He's only in his second year. This is also the first time going into a training camp that he is the guy at center. Remember, you had the veterans there last year. You had a Connor McGovern who was still there and ultimately ended up starting the season as the center. So I think that there's a little bit of that, too. You got a Hall of Famer that that is placing a heck of a lot of trust in you, of course, in the quarterback. You mentioned the defense. I mean, the defense is going to do this to a lot of offenses all throughout the season, so you hope. So I think that there's a little bit of that involved. However, I will say, and I was even talking about this with a couple of people, McGovern is still out there, right? I mean, he's still unsigned. And I know he was rehabbing from an injury last year, and I remember talking to him on Baggy Day at the end of the season, and, he certainly expressed that, if healthy, he would certainly love to be back with the Jets and to continue playing football. And I wonder if something like this persists and it continues, a guy like Connor McGovern is only a phone call away. So would it absolutely shock me if the problem compounds itself, if maybe a reunion is in the works? I don't think you put it past him because that Rodgers would be comfortable with a guy like that.
Yeah, look, and I think one thing I talked about all offseason was, the Jets are in a really nice spot where they want AVT to be the right guard. They want Joe Tittman to be the center. But worst case, in a pinch, Joe Tittman can play guard. He played guard last year. That's how he started out. AVT obviously can play tackle or guard. And hey, if John Simpson's struggling early on, and whatever, or Joe Tittman's not, I'm not suggesting that he start moving guys around. I'm just saying it's part of the flexibility. And McGovern, again, do I think that he's the most incredible center that's ever walked the face of earth? No, but he's got familiarity with the scheme, this team, the system, the whole 9 yards. He's probably a better option than Xavier Newman at this point, if need be, if someone goes down. So. I'm on the same page with you. I want to kind of highlight a couple other things here. We saw there's been a lot made of Garrett Wilson and Rodgers, or they have a lot of vocal conversations and things. I think it's awesome, and I think it's awesome for a couple of reasons. One, because not only are they talking and doing things like that, but they're also able to sit there and you go out and see it every day. It's Garrett Wilson, 1,000 targets. They're on the same page, and I think working through that, getting on the same page. Him and Devontae used to be the same way, and I'm not expecting Garrett Wilson to go have a first-team All-Pro season. I think that's maybe he does, but I'm just saying
they're great.
Obviously, it'd be great, but I don't want to put those expectations. I think let's get him get through his third year before we start comparing him to Devontae. But I also just think that it's a good thing, and I feel like people are they're fighting. They're not this is what guys do. Is this again just a slow news day thing? Why do we make the biggest deals of stuff that just frankly doesn't matter that much?
Well, like you said, because it's the world we live in right now, right? It's the internet, it's social media. That one clip goes viral and everybody's singing, and all of a sudden it's Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson have a problem. It was funny. I don't know if you caught the interview that Aaron did with the NFL Network on Saturday. With Brian Baldinger and Judy Batista. I thought it was really well done. I thought the questions were good. I thought Aaron was really good in his answers, and it's funny because in the interview he referenced the situation with Garrett, to where maybe they weren't on the same page with one play, but then he was almost testing him, saying, a little bit later on, I'm coming back to you with the same look so you know. And then that clip kind of hits the internet and surfaces, and you're like, oh, maybe that's what he was talking about. So and I'm with you. The fact that they can have this open dialogue and have this conversation, I think that it's healthy because, look, the goal is to win this year. And this isn't like a rebuilding project and developing young players. No, you're supposed to hit the ground running here. Practice time now in the NFL is a lot more limited than what it used to be. Hell, when Aaron Rodgers even broke into the league, Will, I mean, you know that. You don't have two-a-days anymore. There's only X amount of time that you could spend with these guys on the field. That includes the offseason. So I got no problem with that whatsoever. And I even pulled Garrett aside yesterday after practice as he was coming off the field, and I said, well, just joking around with him. I'm like, boy, you and the quarterback on the same page, whatever? And he laughed it off. He said, they're fine. And Garrett's one of the best dudes, not just a great football player, but off the field as well. He's got a great head on his shoulders. That's the last guy that you should worry about if you're a Jet fan having any sort of issues whatsoever as far as getting on the same page with the quarterback.
Yeah, look, Rogers talked about it on with the media on I guess Thursday or Friday, and just about working some things through with Garrett of, hey, maybe speed cut this here, and then Garrett goes out and does it. And he hits him for a couple completions on Saturday that he talked about earlier. Hey, he's talking about Corley in terms of in a 3-by-1 set, you're running a vertical to try to take that far hash safety, but like look. Make sure you're looking because I might come to you. Like just because other quarterbacks don't do that doesn't mean that I won't. Like I've been in the league 20 years, I know what I'm doing. Like just like got to adapt to playing with him. So I want to talk about the only other negative, I guess, is obviously the Reddick situation. And it's, again, I've talked about it a week straight. I'm sure you've done the same thing. It's like, how much more is there really to say? Look, the fines have gotten up to a point now where it's like $50K a day when you're making $15 million is obviously a little different. He's gotten fined now or given up in terms of bonuses or things like that, like $750,000 as of today in total, which is obviously an exorbitant amount of money, no matter how much money you make. How close do you think we are to a solution here, A? And B, I think I'm not saying that Reddick has all the leverage because he does not, right? Like it's both sides have their reasons for leverage. But I will say, like, this Jets defense is not anywhere near as good without Haason Reddick. And I know I've seen what happens when guys want to get paid. The fan base is usually like, oh, this player's not that good. We can, they prop up the guy that's cheaper. Will McDonald's not ready to be a starter yet. Not anything I've seen. And I don't even know that yesterday he was running with the threes at points. So I don't know, like, if we want to, he needs to be here because the Jets need him to accomplish their goal. So I guess, do you feel like this is imminent here? I thought maybe like Sunday was a great day, first off day. They've been 5 days. Now they're in full pads. Obviously didn't happen. Seems like there's traction, but where are you at with this whole Reddick situation?
Well, I mean, a little surprised, just like you, right? I mean, and first off, I mean, I thought he would be there already. And if we want to even go back to the offseason, I was like, oh, well, this isn't going to last the training camp, but here we are. And then even once training camp got underway, I mean, I had heard a couple of things that he was even going to be there this past weekend. And now that has come and gone, and he's still not there. One of the things I did hear, though, Will, that was surprising is that, like, apparently, and look, we know he wants to get paid, but apparently he wants to get paid, like, a lot. And look, I don't know what type of advice he's getting and what type of counsel, but this is a guy who, I understand leverage is a big thing and people want to assign it, but if you're Haason Reddick, let me ask you this question. Like, you're 29, going to be 30 years of age. Does he really think if he sits out the entire season and hits free agency again as a 30-year-old edge rusher that he's going to get this massive blockbuster multi-year contract, that he kind of sees himself getting? I don't see it. Coming off of a year where he's not playing, at the age of 30, like that's just not going to happen. So I don't know who's advising him. And sure, it would certainly benefit him and the football team to get him in there because, you're right. You have lost a couple of guys on that defensive line, whether it's Bryce Huff, JFM, you throw in even a guy like Quentin Jefferson on the inside who was productive last year until he got hurt. They need a Haason Reddick, and that's what's really going to make this defense fly. But as far as leverage is concerned, I mean, the Jets can sit there and say, oh, yeah, we've got a top defense, a top 5 defense the last couple of years, but I think that we all know it will be that much better and that much more formidable if you have Reddick here. But, guy wants to get paid. It's a business. It's a job. And I was even saying this to somebody, we were talking about it this morning. If you think about it, like we could look at it as outsiders and say, well, Jets are ready to fire this year. This is a team that can do some good things. They can compete for a championship. Haason Reddick, though, just left a situation that was a championship caliber team with Philadelphia, right? The guy was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. So I don't necessarily know if winning is the number one priority for him right now because he was just there and he was unhappy with the contract situation in Philadelphia, which I think played a role in this trade. So,
yeah, look.
Right?
Yeah, look, I was going to say, Ross Tucker came on Tuesday, he covers the Eagles in the whole 9 yards. He's like, he's from Philly, grew up, went to Temple. Like, he was in the perfect situation.
Yeah.
And he wanted him to deal. Otherwise, he'd be playing for the Eagles still, and Bryce Huff would be a Jet or a Commander or one of the other teams that were heavily interested in him. So, I just, again, like, the one thing that's the problem here, and I think this is why we're at where we're at, and it's not a hold in, which is what's more common, is Reddick has like no ties to the Jets, right? Like he's never played here. He hasn't really worked with any of his staff. Like he knows Quinnen Williams and these guys, but like he's no tie to the Jets, and right. The Jets have no tie to him. It's not like one of your own players. That's why it's such a rare situation. But I'd like to see this, at least him be in the building. Not even if he's not practicing, just like, hey, we're working a deal, be done in the next I don't know, 24 hours, and he's going to be in the building, and we're going to give you a raise this year, and or like we're going to do a 2-year extension. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the case at the moment. I just think everything changed when they traded JFM, it feels like, and his agent or whoever is representing him. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm assuming was like, wow, they have only one like surefire starter at edge, and you're the other guy, like, and they just got rid of their depth. Like you know, maybe you can get paid a little bit more. I don't know. It's a tough situation. One guy who impressed me a lot yesterday and has had a really nice spring, has already started with a nice summer, is Braylon Allen. I liked the pick, didn't love it. I was like, all right. No, I thought sometimes in college didn't play as physical as his size maybe indicated he would. And yesterday, like, there was 2 runs. Connor tweeted it out, but like he ran Tony Adams right over.
Trucking
And then,
dudes, yeah.
Trucking dudes. Do a stiff arm on DJ Reed that, like, if it wasn't teammate on teammate, I think DJ Reed might have been on the ground. So I'm again, Brees is surefire number 1. He's probably one of the top 2 or 3 backs in the league right now, or at least going into the year. Allen looks like a pretty damn good number 2. And when they drafted him, I was like, can he be Sean Green on those teams where like you get a lot of the nitty gritty yards, you break one because the team's kind of worn down from, a Thomas Jones or obviously, then going into LT and stuff. Have you been as impressed with Allen as I have? I don't want to get too excited, but like he has been really impressive through a week of camp.
No, absolutely, and it's nice to see. And it's funny, when we sit here and try to map out like what's the philosophy going to be offensively for this team. I'm just my own personal opinion and how this team was constructed a little bit. Yes, you still have the Hall of Fame quarterback, and ultimately you're going to want to throw the football a lot. It's the NFL in 2024, pass-heavy league. But I think if they had their druthers, build a lead, and then when you get into the fourth quarter, you rely on your defense, number 1. And number 2, now you have this stable of backs, a couple of young guys, throw in Brees Hall, that they just ground and pound teams like they did back in the day, like you said, when you had the Sean Green, Thomas Jones throw in LT the following year there in 2010, and then just like bleed out the clock and defeat opponents that way. That's what a guy like Braylon Allen's going to be used for, I think. And I'll tell you, not to sit here and play like the number crunch game with the roster or anything like that, but you wonder what, Braylon Allen, and the more he continues to turn heads, what does that mean for a guy like Izzy Abanikanda, who last year was supposed to be that like kind of change of pace back, and, but the thing about it, though, Will, last year, think about it, right? Like Dalvin Cook was a guy who didn't get a lot of touches. And that was a guy who's had a lot of success in the NFL. So I just wonder, with this scheme, with Nathaniel Hackett and company, like, is it going to feature like a heavy dose of Brees Hall, and everybody else, you kind of pick up the scraps? So we'll see.
Yeah, no, like we'll see. I think the Izzy, the Izzy conversation is interesting. I wonder if like he's a guy that, I don't even know if he has enough value for this, but they like flip for a future 6 or 7 at the end of camp after getting a million different, looks. If he doesn't impress, he impresses, but like, is he going to make the Jets roster? They try to do what they did with Michael Carter last year or something like that. Like, again, very different situations. I'm just saying, like, it feels like there's room for 3 backs plus either an extra tight end or a fullback on this roster. I don't know that, like, Izzy will get picked up on waivers if the Jets cut him.
Oh, no doubt.
So he's not a practice squad guy.
The thing about Izzy, though, that's interesting, like, and I keep hearkening back to, and I know that one year is different from the next, and, but if you remember that season finale last year in New England, and I know it was a meaningless game and everything, but those type of games for a team that's playing out the string, it means nothing. That's a game where, like, they feature the young guys usually. Like, and I remember that day, like, in the pregame show, thinking that, like, Izzy's going to have a big day. Like, I thought he was going to get the majority of the touches like 15, that afternoon.
20 touches, yeah.
Exactly. Like, this is going to be his coming out party. Like the Cedric Houston game back in the day, almost friggin' 20 years ago, where he gets a lot of touches. But they barely gave him the ball. And that was when they ran Brees to try to get him 1,000 yards. And I was like, that's kind of interesting, because you could talk up a player all you want and say that he's got ability and you like what he's doing. But when it came time to actually give him a look, they didn't do that in a meaningless game. And now you went out and drafted 2 more guys. You wonder where he is there kind of in the pecking order. So I think that to me still kind of resonates a little bit when looking about this running back depth chart.
Yeah, what I've learned with the Jets is, and I think this with any team when you cover the NFL, is what you learn is like coaches tell you a lot of stuff. It's about what they show you. And when it comes to game day and when it comes to how they view players, I remember last summer, like the Jets couldn't have talked more glowingly about Bryce Huff, and I love Bryce and all that stuff. But, they hadn't played in the fourth quarter of the Hall of Fame game, and it's like there was clearly something there. Like the Jets can tell you all they want with Will McDonald, and like maybe Will ends up having a great year, and I hope he does because I think he's a good kid and like has a lot of potential. But I don't know. Like they tell you a lot, but didn't gain any weight this offseason, even though he was expected to gain 20 pounds. And, Michael Clemens is playing over him. Like,
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys playing over him right now that, I know it's base and all that stuff, but like, it's just a weird situation. So if Will McDonald's playing the fourth quarter of the Giants preseason game, like it's probably because he's not quite as far along as they want him to be. Last two things quickly here. I'm going to ask you one. I'm going to finish one baseball question before we finish with the Jets expectation question. We're about 2.5 hours from the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Yanks or Mets, who makes the bigger move, I guess, in the next 2.5 hours after this coming out? Both teams kind of feel like they need at least one pitcher and probably could use an extra bat. Maybe more so the Yankees could use an extra bat. But either the team make a big move, or we're going to be in kind of for a little bit of a tease of a trade deadline.
I don't know. If you ask me one of the two teams, I'll say the Yankees. Only because I think the Yankees have a little bit of Jets to them in terms of all in to win right now. Right? Like, you have Juan Soto until the end of the season. So that's the guy that you want to prioritize. Like, there's no guarantees on your team next year. So while you've got this guy here, you got to maximize your chances to get that trophy. So I would say the Yankees, because the Mets, they realize there's a bigger picture ahead. If they sneak into the playoffs this year, that's gravy. But nobody expects the Mets to be a championship team this season. But I would say the Yankees. I don't know if there's going to be that guy where, like, we were saying on the show this morning, Rick and I, like, are we going to be in the studio tomorrow morning and be like, wow, I can't believe that the Yankees got this guy or that he was traded at all? Because you've seen this trade deadline unfold a little bit like it's a seller's market, and the price tag for even just, like, okay pitchers just, like, makes your eyes pop out of your head, right? I mean, like, what the Astros gave up to get Yusei Kikuchi from Toronto, what, Estevez and Adam out of the bullpen, what those guys fetched in return. It's like, my gosh. So the only guy that I would necessarily think about maybe going above and beyond to try to acquire would be somebody with control beyond this year. And that's somebody like a Tarek Skubal from Detroit. That's a guy who could win a Cy Young Award this year, right? So you could get him on your squad, plus keep him for another couple of seasons after that. That's one of the guys that I would look to overpay if I was the Yankees. Hell, even the Mets, let's be honest. But I think the need is certainly greater if you're talking about a Yankee team that has designs on winning.
Yeah, look, I'm on the same page. I would much rather go after him than Crochet, especially with the contract situation. Last question here quickly. Figuratively gun to your head, because it's a horrible phrase, but I don't know what the phrase to use. July 30th, we're about 3:30 in the afternoon here. Gut feeling on the Jets record prediction. I feel like you could talk yourself into anywhere between 10 and 13 wins, depending on how optimistic you want to get. Where do you think you're going to end up landing, when it's all said and done before the season starts?
Well, let me turn it around and ask you a question. How's that? Okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
You're a fan. Okay. Long time. In your opinion, what at the end of this season, whenever it ends, like, you could look back on this 2024 version of the Jets and say, I'm okay with this year. Like, what would be satisfactory to you?
Division. They got to get to the division round.
So win a playoff game.
Win a playoff game, or you got to get to round two. If they lose, I've said this a million times. If they lose in the wild card game and they're playing at Kansas City as the 6th seed and KC's the 3 seed and they lose 27-24, maybe a different conversation. Getting blown out in the wild card round is not good enough, and or losing a home playoff game is not good enough. Like, they need to be in round two, because I feel like doing a Miami this year, like, is that really a successful season for a team with all in aspirations? I don't think so. I think, you went and lost? Not so sure. That's round one feels, especially the expanded playoffs, doesn't feel that successful.
Yeah, and remember, these were the conversations last year, right? It was like Super Bowl, which I thought was ridiculous. You can't talk about a team that hasn't been in the playoffs in 13 years and say all of a sudden, snap your fingers, Super Bowl or bust. That's ridiculous. How about make the playoffs? And then we can talk about Super Bowl. I'm kind of with you, though. I certainly think playoffs are on the table. Now, look, we preface all this stuff by, knock on wood, they got to stay healthy. If God forbid the quarterback goes down again, I don't care who the backup is. They're not achieving these things. But playoffs, I certainly think the division is very much on the table. Look, on paper, I think on paper they are the best team in the division. And I'm not just saying this because, we do the games and everything. This is a talented team. Like, the front office has done a really, really good job putting this team together. And if it all fires, this team should achieve some nice things. So division's on the table, but I'm with you. You got to at least get to the second round to where you can look back and say, all right, I like where this thing is headed. And Rodgers says he wants to play for at least 2 more years. Then you take this season, build upon it next year, and hopefully you have that big fairy tale right off into the sunset with him holding a Lombardi trophy. But nobody's going to complain if it happens this year, Will, either. We'll take it this year if it happens.
No, I don't think anybody will. I think the mantra's kind of been beers in MetLife parking lot in January. I'm all. I mean, look, I just it would be nice. Hasn't happened in 20 plus years. Dan, obviously appreciate it. We just talked about this off camera, but you guys will still be doing pre and post.
Yep.
Be in Q1043. Will not be on I guess 1050 or 97.3 or 98.3, whatever it is. Anything else you got coming up? And before we get you out of here, obviously we'll have to do this again during the season.
No, just absolutely, we'll do it anytime. And right, I mean, anybody that's listened to our broadcast over the last, how many? This will be year number 7 for me, being with the team and doing the games. So Greg and myself, yeah, we get this thing underway. When's the first game? August 10th. That Saturday. Nice high noon kickoff against Washington on a nice summer Saturday afternoon. You can't love anything more than that.
1,000 degrees out.
1,000 degrees. Thank goodness we're inside. Doing the pre and the post game and stuff. But no, it'll be great. Just a different home on 104.3. We look forward to that. But it's still going to be the same broadcast, same stuff you come to expect. And let's hope a lot more wins this year for the Jet fans. Right?
No, yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate hopping on. And again, I'll be back on the feed Thursday, and we'll talk to everybody later this week.